This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
And welcome to our October episode with a great guest and a very on topic for Halloween subject matter, which we're really excited about. So today I'm going to have her introduce herself soon here after I get through our, what we're highlighting this month with promotion and talking about patrons and all the good stuff. But yeah, we're here to talk today, believe it or not, about the intersection between slash horror, BPD, and DBT, and how all these things came together for our guest that we have, who wrote a book about how slash horror really improved and helped her conceptualize her mental health struggles. So we're really excited for this. But before we get there, couple quick things. First great thing, we had a patron, Ashley, who we're shouting out because Ashley went from being a $2 a month patron to a $5 a month patron. So thank you, Ashley. We've previously shouted you out before. At least we should have at some point in time or another. But thanks for continuing to be a patron and supporting the podcast even more than you already were. We really, really appreciate that. And then the promotional thing that I wanted to highlight this month is our Instagram account. Kate and I are not responsible for anything happening over on our Instagram. We've had times where the Instagram has been really active, times where it's, kind of lulled and slowed down. But recently, thanks to our new team member, Eli has been putting out some really great content on our Instagram. So if you're not already following us on Instagram, now would be the time to do that. So you can see all the great things that are being created by Eli, which we are super thankful for. So if you want to follow us on Instagram, it's simple. DBT and Me Podcast. That's all you got to look for on Instagram to find us there. Okay, so our guest today is Zelda Eli. And so, Zelda, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us just a brief introduction of who you are before we dive more into our questions for you, your story, all the great things that you're going to tell us about how slash horror and mental health can actually really be two things that can go together really nicely. I'm really excited for this. So yeah, I'll have you introduce yourself a little bit to all our listeners.
Hello, my name is Zelda. I am someone who has struggled with borderline personality disorder. And one of the things I really like is looking at horror from a different angle, as well as for it to help me, teach me about my own mental health. So that's something I have been working on through horror, believe it or not.
Yeah, I believe it. Exactly. I love it. I would say, sorry, didn't mean to talk over you, Michelle.
I talked over you, Kate. You're all good. You have the first question, so it's your turn.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I was just going to say before I ask the question that I really love this perspective that you're bringing, Zelda, because I would say that I came to a much better understanding of my anxiety at one point a few years ago through the lens of looking at a horror movie. So I'm very excited to hear someone else talk about that kind of idea. But to start with, the question we start all of the interviews with is, when did you first come across DBT and what drew you to it?
I definitely have to say my therapist. He introduced it to me, but I became more interested once I knew that Marsha Linehan had borderline personality disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think whenever, and this is something, of course, that Kate and I are super passionate about, which is why we have our other podcast, The Couch and the Chair, because we want to share not just as therapists, but as, just people with, our own journeys and stuff. But yeah, I love that really took it from maybe being something that like, oh, okay, my therapist has talked about this. So like, oh, wait, the creator of this,
Yeah.
Has this lived experience and really can speak from that lens that these skills can actually truly work.
I think it gave it
Yes.
veritability, right? Like it now it felt like it was. I remember when she mentioned having it and how excited I was to find out, not for her, but like, oh, okay, you actually get us in a way that maybe I didn't know that you did.
Yep. The second question that we ask all of our guests is, for you with DBT, what is the thing that you most like about DBT, and what's maybe something that you wish were different, or if you could change anything about it, what would that be?
I'd say my favorite thing about DBT is definitely radical acceptance. I struggled with daddy hunger, and I emotionally craved for an older man to tell me that you're like a daughter to me. After going through the radical acceptance process, I came to accept that he wanted to be a friend to me and not reparent me. My least favorite thing about DBT is the books that do not mention Marsha Linehan or the origins of DBT. I understand that the authors want to stay on topic, but it's good to know that Marsha struggled with a mental health disorder.
Yeah, exactly. We think that's an important thing for people to know. And yeah, there may be different schools of thought out there about how much to include that when talking about DBT. But because, especially like you said, that was so significant for you and really helping you like want to approach DBT, yes, we agree that that should be as broadly spread as Marsha wants it to be.
Yeah, I like acknowledging the roots and where it came from, right? Giving credit where credit's due. All right.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about your mental health journey and what led to you being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder?
Well, my anger was as dark as my skin. And it led to two therapists terminating me as their client. With my first therapist, I was a client for a year and a half. The day he terminated me, he told me that I might have borderline personality disorder. I never heard of the disorder. My only reference to the word was the 80s song by Madonna called Borderline, if you can believe that. With my second therapist, I lasted a few weeks with him. Everything was going well until I changed the relationship. This time, my anger happened through emails. In my last email to me, he said he wanted to help me, but my anger was too intense. When I start begging someone to not leave my life, I sound like a little girl asking her father not to go. Thinking about both therapists, my mind kept telling me you're not good enough, that they would rather run away than help you. Later on, I'd have to say, I'm not sure how much later, but I'd definitely say later on, I read Judy Dyer's Borderline Personality Disorder. In the book, she talked about the borderline symptoms. Many things resided with me: the regular bouts of anger, the destructive impulses, fear of being abandoned, the intense mood and emotions, and how they change so fast. Suicide ideation and black and white thinking. For your listeners who don't know what that is, black and white thinking is a person who views a situation as all good or all bad, and there is no middle ground. One of my black and white moments was when my husband told me he dreaded coming home to me because of my anger, verbal abuse, and destructive nature in our home. To me, he was going to abandon me and terminate our marriage. So I called a third therapist. I told my new therapist that I was terminated by two therapists. My marriage was strained, and I think I have borderline personality disorder. Working with him, I exhibited anger, verbal abuse, and a lot of blaming. He didn't terminate me, but he did let me know he wasn't going to tolerate my behavior. My third therapist was tough but skilled. And I kid you not, his therapeutic approach was like the HBO series The Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is a fantasy drama where the characters battle for the Iron Seat, which is the seat of the Seven Kingdoms. Instead of the characters, my therapist helped me to realize that my emotions battled me, dethroned me, and claimed the Iron Seat. I dwelled on this eye-opener, and for some time I thought I was ready for an official diagnosis. So I met with a psychologist who did a series of testing. Then he sent the results to my therapist. In July of 2002, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I took that news hard. My therapist kept telling me that borderline does not define you, but I felt defined. I didn't want to have a mental disorder, and I didn't want to be called batshit crazy. I was ashamed of my diagnosis. I was so ashamed that I would not pick up my medication from the pharmacy, so my husband did. What helped me get over the shame was therapy, my husband reassuring me that he didn't see me differently, and sharing my diagnosis with a good friend from Texas.
Yeah. What stood out to me just now in what you shared, a couple things, right? Like, one is that you were really transparent with your third therapist when you started, which I imagine was not an easy thing.
No,
like, look, I've been fired twice before, but please help me. Yes. And that I admittedly, I have not watched Game of Thrones, but still I like that your therapist talked in such a way that's really relatable of look, this is what's happening emotionally for you. Didn't make it all technical and didn't make it all jargony, but was just look, it's like this. It's like what's happening in this series. And that really seemed to click for you.
I definitely have to say it was more me seeing that comparison than him.
Oh, gotcha. You connected those dots all yourself. That's even better in a lot of ways. But yeah, just the fact that you can share, because we get people all over the map. Some people, when they get a diagnosis, they're like, I'm so relieved. This feels like a huge weight off of me. And for you to actually say, no, when I got this diagnosis, it was incredibly hard to accept and come to terms with. I fought it kind of within myself for a long time. Even if I kind of knew that's what this was, I really didn't want
the official label. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want the official label, and that was really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think similar things stood out to me, Michelle, and I just also liked the idea of a therapist who's able to support while maintaining boundaries, which is what it sounded like your therapist was able to do. And also that you found a way through some of the stigma and fear that came up when you had the initial diagnosis by reaching out to therapist and your husband and the friend and being able to get that support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely. It's a journey. It really is a journey. And when you feel like people are leaving your life, it becomes even harder. And that's something that I feared. Because if you look at it, I can say that anger was my primary emotion when it came to borderline. And because of that, it was volatile. It was hard to think that people had stayed. When I came to the end of that and getting help, I couldn't believe people had stayed. Because if the shoe were on the other foot, and I'm being honest, I would have left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go a little bit into your book.
Okay.
Kate and I love having authors on. So for all of our listeners, the title of your book is BPD, How Horror Genre Became My Borderline Therapy, which I think is a great title. And here's the truth. For myself, like Kate, I'm aware that you're more into horror than I am. But like, yes, I've seen horror movies, but like horror is definitely not my genre of choice that I tend to go to when I'm sitting down to watch a film. So I know we probably have listeners out there who maybe on one end of the spectrum of like, they are super fans of slash horror and they are here for it. And then we may have other listeners that are like, this is really not what I typically go to. So I'm wondering for those listeners who may not be as familiar with the slash horror genre, like, how would you describe it? And like, can you tell us a little bit more about like the horror arch characters that you tend to see consistently throughout different horror films? Absolutely. I'm excited for this. I'm about to get educated. I'm going to learn a lot.
Well, when you come into slash horror, it always involves a mass killer who stalks and kills, such as Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th, Michael Myers in Halloween, Ghostface in the movie Scream. Now, horrors do contain a lot of blood and gore. Though it is graphic in nature, it does explore cautionary tales, morality, fear, and the consequences of reckless behavior. In regards to the horror arch characters, they are the cliche characters that people recognize, like the jock, the nerd, the slut, the final girl. And every slasher has a final girl. The person that confronts the killer and makes it to the end of the movie.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting to think about how, like, there's those different characters throughout all the different
tropes.
Films. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of your book, I'm just very excited. What made you think about writing it? Like, there's one thing to have the experience of finding this therapeutic benefit from horror and from slasher horror in particular, but what in you translated that from just having the experience to writing your book? And what was the process of writing it like for you?
Okay. Well, one thing, I'm a big fan of 80s slash horror. I love the Friday the 13th series, which is Jason Voorhees, a hockey face machete character who kills teenagers at Camp Crystal Lake. But in the first sequel, the killer is Jason's mother. In the movie, there's a scene where she explains her killing rampage. As she explains herself, her emotions go from calm to chaos. As she's flipping over the furniture, it reminded me of my own destructive nature. As I continued to watch this scene, other borderline symptoms came up, like idolization, devaluation, impulsivity, and black and white thinking. Recognizing these symbols myself, I wrote them down, and I'd say about a year later, I thought it'd be interesting to write a book about horror, borderline, and turn it into a memoir. In the process of writing the book, this is a nice thing, so you're not going to read a long-winded book. All the chapters are 3 pages. So the first page is horror, the second page is memoir, and the third page is the borderline therapy.
Yeah, that's great. I love that format. That's really cool.
That is, fast and digestible, right? Which is something that can be motivating for people to continue to move forward.
Absolutely, because I hate long-winded books.
No,
you're fine.
Well, we would love to have you read a little bit of your book for our listeners so that they can get a taste. And I mean, Kate and I, we read a little bit ourselves when we were first meeting you and looking at having you on as a guest. But I think today you're going to read something out loud that Kate and I didn't read before. I think this is something new. So yeah, we'll turn it over to you to read a little bit.
All right. Well, this is a first page twister, as I like to say. Just one page to get you interested. And I go with the arch character, the slut. So I guess I'll start reading. Horror sluts are a big deal in slasher movies. In Slash, she represents boobs and blood. a combination that is just as satisfying as milk and cookies. She sticks her chest out because she doesn't care if she is whispered over, lingered over, or overly slut-shamed. The character and horror fans know that her breast is her superpower. And whenever she appears on film, there is a mood shift in the theater. The mere sight of her breast caused some guy to yell, "Hey tits." His words made some people in the audience erupt in laughter, while others replied with a hushed sound. As for my 8-year-old self, I sat in my theater seat, very irritated at the chuckling adults and the slut character. Clearly, I wasn't into the slut's milk. To me, her bosom was impeding me from glorifying the gore. When it came to the slut, I was tired of the knife breast scenarios. I wanted that satisfying cookie, the part where the blood comes in. I wanted to see the masked killer slice open her stomach like warm cherry pie, then dismember her manicured fingernails. Though I didn't get the grisly death that I had hoped for, the slut's death did change the horror fans. As they watched her death, they were horror fans that looked away from the lava of blood and cheered at her quick demise. Recalling this throwback memory, I realized I shared a commonality with the slut. In horror, the slut did change the mood in the theater room, while I changed the environment in my marital home. And then there's the 2 pages of where you learn of you really see my borderline at its worst. Okay. But I'm going to hold off from sharing those 2, that's for sure. Just enough to give you a taste.
Love it. No, I really appreciate, as someone who has watched a lot of horror and read even more of it, I think it's pretty rare that anyone acknowledges the strength or the, like you said, atmosphere changing sort of tenor to the movies. I don't think people acknowledge the slut character very much for anything other than being vying, for who's going to die first. And she's a pretty good bet, most of the time, to say. But yeah, I think it's pretty awesome that you found space to find some strengths that she as a character has and that she brings to the movie and to the movie fan or horror fans' experience of the movie.
And I think one of the things, like, when you see her come on screen, like I said, she does change the mood of the room. And I would say, as someone who had struggled with borderline personality disorder, that was me. I was someone, when I walked in the room, I could see that my husband Sam, he definitely didn't always like my presence. And I always felt like there should have been eggshells on my floor, because he definitely walked on them. That's for sure. And so I can't help but think that, that I was so volatile at that time. I mean, I was someone, like I said, I could put the temperature of my house into how my attitude was going to be. I was someone who tossed wine glasses. I broke dishes on the floor, and I turned over my dining room table. So trust me, when I say that anger was my first borderline symptom, it truly was. I think in that time, I don't think that my husband knew what to do to me, because I asked him one time when I was in that state. I said, "Why didn't you ever call the police?" And he said that he was embarrassed, and he didn't. I think just as a man, he was embarrassed to call and have them even question, can't you control your wife? And realizing that wasn't the case. Because when I acted like that, my husband had to physically restrain me from tearing up the stuff in our house. And as he tried to restrain me, I would kick him, I would spit on him. And there was a lot of domestic violence in our house. And definitely, I would say on my part, it was. And it was hard. it's hard looking back at that time and knowing that that was me and that was the person, that was the same person that did all that. But I am very thankful my husband stayed with me. But because if he had left, I think I would have killed myself. Mm-hmm. I could truly and honestly say that I would have killed myself, because I'm not someone who has a lot of friends, and I'm estranged from my family. Mm-hmm. So to me, my husband is all that I have. So for him to just get up and go is something. I think I only had one incident where he walked out the door on me. And when he walked out that door, I kept screaming his name for him to stop. And he actually did. He turned around and he came back home. Mm-hmm. But again, our marriage was strained. Yeah. And I sit down and I think about it, and I don't know how he put up with that. I don't even know how he had the strength to put up with that. Because again, if the shoe were on the other foot, I don't think I would. I know I wouldn't have stayed. I just wouldn't have stayed.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your transparency about that. It's one of the things that I like to champion a lot in this podcast and just in my work, is being willing to own our past behaviors, even when they were unhealthy or harmful to others. And I think it takes a lot of self-awareness and courage to be able to own having engaged in those behaviors from that space. So I really appreciate your vulnerability and honesty about that, because I think that's a thing that could use more modeling in the world, is to be able to accept that good people do shit things. And so you can admit to having done shit things without saying you're a bad person. So thank you very much for bringing that stuff to the table so plainly.
I had bad behavior.
Me too. I was thinking when you were talking about stuff, I thought about when I kicked in a shower door. Yeah, things like that. Mm-hmm.
That had to hurt. Yeah. That had to hurt.
I think you actually have the next question, Michelle. I just wanted to respond to what Zelda was saying.
I do. There. Yeah, I love your responses. Yeah, and I think actually the part of your book that you read, Zelda, really speaks to this next question, which, as you were describing it, like such a vivid description of like cutting into the slut's stomach like a slice of cherry pie.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? Like, what a description there. And again, I imagine that some listeners hearing that might again feel like drawn to that, while other people might feel kind of like, oh, or like repulsed by it a little bit. So like in general, I think horror can be a pretty polarizing genre where some people love it and some people hate it. But like, especially with, the slash horror, the gore, all of that, like, what do you think it is that draws some people to that while other people are repulsed by it? How do you make sense of that?
The fear factor, the adrenaline rush. And also, I think horror really taps into real life experiences, like going to summer camp, trick-or-treating on Halloween, or trespassing on property. But I also think it's mere curiosity. People are intrigued by the darker aspects of the human behavior, such as one human being carving up other human beings and the different types of killing. Be it the ripped skin of pretty girls, the contorted limbs of muscular boys, or simply slaughter sex, which of course I have to admit, that's my favorite. That is my favorite in the horror genre. It is. I also think that it's interesting to learn the killer's background, what he looks like before the mask, how did he obtain the mask, who turned the killer into a maniac, and it usually concludes with the killer being both a victim and a villain. I do think the unfortunate side of horror is that horror fans see character trauma as their entertainment. For people who are repulsed by horror, I think they dislike the graphic violence. They also don't like someone or something jumping out at them, be it a black cat or a sharp object. Also thinking about that being in that situation, a situation that could involve torture, mutilation, or bloodiness. For others, it's a lack of enjoyment. Some people want something on the lighter side, such as comedy or a chick flick. which I don't want that. I don't want that.
That's funny. I like that personal preference bit coming in there. And absolutely, I love the points you made about what might pull people towards or away from that kind of imagery. I think personally, I'm I don't know, mentally safer from a lot of horror movie stuff because I can't picture things. So images can't stick with me. I see it when I see it and it's gone the moment it's gone. And I think that definitely helps me have a higher tolerance for gore than many people might. But bringing it back around to mental health, what have been the main things that have been most helpful for you with your mental health since you got your diagnosis?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I definitely have to say having a supportive husband, the combination of medication and therapy, and telling a few friends about my diagnosis, and believe it or not, reviewing my therapy handouts and writing. And I think that is the one thing. I think when we get to a better place, or let me say, when I got to a better place, I didn't want to forget how far I had come and how far I needed to stay. Because it's easy to look at therapy and think, okay, I'm in a good place, that's it. But you do need those reminders at times when you're in a low place. I've got to have something to refer back to. And that's one of the things I like about DBT therapy. It's not one of those things where you can't find something that applies to you.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where you look at things and you know that if you really want to be strong and you want to continue in your recovery, you got to put this effort into it. Because I had a lot of therapy handouts that, didn't speak to me in a certain season, but in the next it did. So I would definitely advise people, keep those therapy notes and those handouts, because you never know when you may need them again.
Yeah. I like that advice.
Yeah. That's really good advice. And I like that you just named, that maybe at first something doesn't fit, but later it may. And to just kind of keep an open mind there. Like we tell people all the time on this podcast, this is a pretty regular thing Kay and I say, which is you're not going to like every DBT skill out there. There's going to be some that hopefully feel like a good fit. And then there's going to be some that are just, not for you. And that's okay. You don't have to like every skill to get benefit from it. And it sounds like you definitely, found some things that spoke to you. You reviewed those worksheets, you looked at those deeper, and then, at least for the time being, you let go of what didn't. And then as you evolved and you grew, then some of those things later on actually did wind up fitting, but you didn't force it at the time, which I think was really smart.
Like every day, I definitely have to say I hold on to radical acceptance. And I say it, okay, it's a situation where you need to really accept that. My therapist, he has now moved me down from 2 weeks to a month. And that was very scary. I mean, I'm happy in my progress, but it was scary. I was like, no, wait till the next year. But he's like, Zelda, you're ready. So now that I know that I'm ready to handle it, it's like, okay, radical acceptance. It's not where I want to be, but I know this is where I need to be. So,
yeah, that's right. Well, I want to keep this conversation going of what are some other things that you would recommend to our listeners? I think especially those who, for you, your diagnosis was BPD, right? That was the diagnosis you were given. It was really tough for you to come to terms with that. But whether it's BPD or any other mental health diagnosis that maybe our listeners have recently been told they do meet criteria for this diagnosis and they're struggling with that, what would you say to encourage them as they're coming to terms with it for themselves?
I'd say first and foremost, self-compassion. Because we are hardest on ourselves. I know I was. And I want to suggest a book that I read and I think would be helpful to other people. The book is called The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion, Freeing Yourself from Destructive Thoughts and Emotions by Christopher K. Germer. It is a really good book when you are being hard on yourself, when your thoughts are not at a good place, and I would highly recommend that. And I'd say, secondly, when you get your diagnosis and as you're journeying, as you are
journeying. My mouth does that to me
journeying.
sometimes too.
Thank you,
Yeah.
journeying.
It's hard to say. Yeah.
My mouth gets stuck on sounds sometimes and just won't make them.
Thank you. What Kate said, because I'm not going to try that word again. Take accountability for your actions. As for me, I know that I have to let those people in my life know that I take full responsibility for what I said, what I did, and what I expected from them. And if the borderline person does not take accountability, then they become like the mass killer. Now, I know that sounds crazy, so I'm going to explain myself since it's close to Halloween. In horror, the mass killer murders a lot of people, which is called a high body count. In the beginning, he kills people with no direct name, such as the retail clerk or maybe white guy number 4. After the no-name characters, he moves to the main characters, the jock, the nerd, the slut, the stoner, and so on. So the borderline person is like the mass killer, who amasses a high body count. They harm strangers in passing, like the retail clerk or white guy number 4. By harm, I mean verbally, physically, or emotionally. Then the borderline person moves to the main characters, which are their friends and family, which leads to a higher body count and the killing of these relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And I think that's the part about taking responsibility. If we don't start there, it's really hard for any other change to occur. Mm-hmm. That's what I believe. I mean, that's kind of what's the age-old expression, like the first step of realizing you have a problem is to admit that you have a problem, kind of a thing. So whether it's due to somebody being diagnosed with BPD or, anything else that may be creating experiences of anger for them that are then, whether they consciously know it or not, and I think that's what you're getting at. At first, it's really not necessarily like conscious or intentional, but it's just kind of coming out.
It is.
And then over time, it could become more conscious and intentional before hopefully that person has a moment like you described when your husband came to you and was like, look, I'm not feeling safe in our home with you. And you were like, oh, I've got to do something about this. That people will hopefully have those experiences when, whether again it's with anger outbursts or addiction or whatever the thing is that's kind of just happening, like you said with killers, like it's random at the beginning. Happening randomly to the people that you're coming into contact with, that over time it can start to be seen, and then having that kind of like awakening moment to go, yeah, I've got to change this. I don't want to keep causing harm in my relationships. And whether, again, it's a relationship with the cashier at the grocery store for 5 minutes or a relationship with my husband of 20 plus years, I don't want to be harming people around me, either accidentally or with intention. I need to find another way. Yeah. I think that's a really, really interesting way of looking at it. That makes honestly sense. Like, I don't know. I wasn't sure first too. And you were like, okay, somebody with BPD could be like, a mass killer. I'm like, all right, let's see where she goes with this. But it does. I see where you went with it. It makes sense.
We don't care about, I can say for myself, I didn't care about the stranger. I would just have my outbursts and I would go off on a person, and these were people that I didn't even know, and to me, they were the seed. They were just the beginning seed for me to experience my anger through. And then, like I said, in my relationships, look at the main characters in my life. My husband was the biggest, and I'm somebody who should have protected what we have. And I like what you said. He wasn't safe in our home. He really wasn't. But in spite of that, I often wonder, did he sleep with one eye open? I sometimes wonder that, because you just never know when the calm to the chaos is going to begin. And honestly, I didn't even know when it was going to begin. Sometimes it just happened. And I know people think like, okay, nothing just happens. It does. I mean, borderline it is one of those disorders where you go through a lot of loop-de-loops, because I know I did, which is emotions swinging everywhere. So yeah, I mean, that's what I got from the killer. He kills people, and so does the borderline person. We're not physically stabbing them, but we are causing harm to them. We don't care about their feelings. Or the goal is, I'm going to annihilate you with my words. Mm-hmm. I'm going to cuss you out and not care. I don't care if you have feelings. This is what is coming out of me, and this is what is being directed at you. You know what? You're going to stand there and you're going to take it. And I was one of those people. I was happy to make you feel small. As I look at it, is my tongue was truly my weapon.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love the accountability part too. And Michelle, you already said that, so I won't go on too much, but I think it's a hard thing and a really necessary thing, right? It can be easy to say, well, I don't know, I was not myself, or I was too emotional to control my behaviors or whatever, but that doesn't make us not responsible for what we were doing. And I think that accountability and responsibility is really great.
Mm-hmm. And I thank my therapist for that, because he taught me that accountability is so important, because I think that I just wanted to shrug it off and say, well, okay, I'm better. I won't do this again. Yeah. But I wasn't going to do it again. But it doesn't mean that it didn't mean that I didn't need to let those people know that, what, hey, I was wrong. Yeah. I shouldn't have talked to you like that. I shouldn't have treated you like that.
You had repairs to make.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And with a lot of those apologies, a lot of relationships weren't restored. And that's another thing that is very hard. When you think you're going back and you're apologizing and you're sincere, surely they're going to forgive me. Sometimes they choose to say, okay, and leave the relationship. And I had to accept that there are going to be people who left my life. They did leave my life because of how I was. Mm-hmm. And it hurt. It really did hurt. Yeah. But I take accountability that, it all started with me. So, yeah.
Well, before we go into other things like the closing moment, Zelda, are there any last moment promotions that you want to have for yourself?
Yes, I read you a little bit of the slut character. And if you want to see how those chapters, turn out, the second and the third page, you can email me at zehorror@gmail.com. And in the subject matter, please put in podcast.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll post that in the Facebook group. We'll also make sure to put the book recommendation you had. The Mindful Path to Self-Compassion, we'll put a link there, and then we'll make sure that our listeners get your email address. So yeah, they can reach out to you and hear more of your writing. That would be great.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So normally Kate would be doing the closing moment here, but I'm actually going to do it today because Kate has Goose around. And Kate, I think you said that your husband might be coming home any moment and Goose could just lose his mind potentially.
And he's paused for half a moment, but he came in here squeaking a squeaky toy, like squeaky, 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 squeaky. And I was like, oh no. So yeah, I think he's my high probability of playing with that some more, and or my husband coming home. So I will bow out to you, but thank you for being willing to do that. And thank you again, Perfect. Zelda, for being here with us today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Kate.
All right. So let's all settle in. If you can, and you're safe to do so, you can close your eyes, just letting your body get into a comfortable position. And for today's closing moment, we really want to highlight the fact that a genre like horror allows us to experience fear with what we watch, maybe on the screen, without being harmed ourselves. It's a safe way to experience those things that deep down may scare us the most. So in today's closing moment, you're going to have an opportunity to do the same with a fear that you have. And to play around with this, you might want to pick something that scares you somewhat, but maybe not to an extreme degree. Perhaps if you have a phobia of spiders, snakes, heights. We all have a fear in that realm. And today we're going to explore it safely. So when you're ready, bring to mind something that makes you feel afraid. You might want to imagine that source of your fear being very far away from you right now. Imagine yourself having a great amount of distance between you and that thing you fear. And as you see it there, far away from you, this is a good opportunity to take a couple of deeper breaths. Ensuring that your body feels calm, as your mind might start to feel fear seeing that object in front of you. And when you're ready, imagine yourself taking a step closer to it. Noticing what comes up in your body as you approach. Reminding yourself that just as a horror film is all fictional, so too is this just a visualization that you're in right now, and that you are safe as you imagine yourself approaching this feared object. And when you're ready, you can take another step, pausing and noticing after you do so to check in with how your fear is doing. And I invite you to consider for yourself how much closer you might want to get here in this safe space of visualizing. And the choice is yours. You can stop here if it feels like too much. Or you may decide to get right up close, noticing how that feels to really be face to face with the thing that scares you so much. Knowing that as you imagine that, you are not in fact there and you are in fact safe. Sitting with that juxtaposition, maybe feeling afraid while not being harmed. And for now, this closing moment will begin to end. But you can spend as much time here as you want, getting acquainted with the source of your fear. And you can also come back and do this again another time if you'd like, choosing how close to get every time. So when you're ready, you can start to gently move your body. And if your eyes were closed, you can now open them. Come back to the space you're in, fully present. Zelda, thank you for being a guest and what you brought to the podcast today. We really appreciate it.
I hope. Thank you so much for having me, and hopefully I didn't scare your audience.
I think you did a great job. Thanks, everybody, for being here with us. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook profile and search for DBT and Me Podcast.